The traffic of Fifth Avenue never slowed, not even for broken souls. Rain drizzled off the awnings, pooling in the gutter where a girl sat with her knees hugged tight, a cardboard sign trembling in her hands. "Hungry. Please help." Her voice was soft, almost gone from overuse. People walked by in suits, in silk coats, not daring to look too long. She lowered her head every time footsteps passed. From the back of a polished black car, a man watched. Grey hair, tailored coat, his name whispered in every boardroom from New York to Hong Kong. Richard Langford, billionaire, untouchable. His driver glanced in the rearview mirror. "Sir, you might want to see this." Richard leaned forward. His heart skipped. The girl on the sidewalk, hair plastered to her cheeks, lips cracked, was his daughter. He opened the door before the driver could stop him. The city roared, taxis honking, strangers staring as Richard stepped into the rain. His shoes splashed in the gutter, soaking leather that cost more than what the girl had eaten all month. "Emily?" His voice cracked. Her head snapped up, eyes wide with shame, with terror, with something he couldn't place. She scrambled to hide the sign, to shove it under her coat, as if it could erase the truth. "Dead," she whispered. But the words sounded foreign, heavy with secrets. In that single moment, Richard's empire meant nothing. The question wasn't why she was there. It was what had broken so badly between them that his only child would rather beg from strangers than knock on his door. And the truth, when it came, would be heavier than the rain pouring down around them. The rain didn't stop, though the city moved on as if father and daughter weren't standing in the middle of it. Richard's chest tightened in ways he hadn't felt in decades. He was a man who bought and sold skyscrapers, who broke billion-dollar deals with a flick of his pen. But right now, all that power couldn't steady his voice. "Emily," he said again, softer this time. He took a step forward, his hand half raised. She flinched, pulled the hood of her sweatshirt tighter. Her eyes darted to the crowd, afraid of witnesses, afraid of pity. "Don't," she whispered. "Not here." The driver hovered nearby, unsure if he should intervene. Cameras flashed from someone's phone. It wouldn't be long before tabloids ran the headline, "Billionaire's daughter begs in the streets." Richard didn't care. He crouched down, ignoring the ache in his knees, ignoring the rain soaking his coat. He hadn't knelt for anyone in years. "Talk to me, sweetheart. Please, tell me why." Her lips trembled. She shook her head, tears mixing with the rain. And then she said words that cut deeper than any business betrayal he had ever endured. "You don't know me anymore?" "You don't even see me." The crowd shifted. Some slowed, pretending not to listen. Others whispered, recognizing the face of one of the world's richest men, now on his knees before a girl who looked like she hadn't eaten in days. Richard wanted to demand answers, to demand names, to demand justice. But something in Emily's expression, an exhaustion so raw it didn't belong on a 20-year-old face, stopped him. Instead of anger, he reached for compassion. His hand hovered inches from hers, waiting. Not forcing, not buying, just waiting. And for the first time in years, Emily's eyes softened. But she didn't take his hand. She whispered instead, voice barely audible above the storm, "If you really want to know the truth, you'll have to come with me." The driver glanced at Richard, but Richard didn't move. His empire could wait. His meetings could burn. He nodded once. "Lead the way." And so in the pouring rain, the billionaire followed his daughter down the crowded street, each step pulling him further from the world of wealth he controlled, and closer to a truth that would undo everything he thought he knew. The rain let up as Emily led him away from the glass towers and marble lobbies that bore his name. Richard followed without a word, his driver trailing at a distance, unsure if he should call for backup or keep quiet. They crossed into a part of the city Richard had only ever seen from inside tinted car windows. The sidewalks here were cracked, graffiti stretched across bricks like angry signatures, and broken neon signs flickered above bodegas and pawn shops. The billionaire who built empires suddenly felt small, out of place, as though money couldn't shield him here. Emily walked quickly, hugging herself, not once looking back to see if he kept pace. She ducked into a narrow alley, then down a set of steps that led beneath a crumbling church. The faint hum of voices reached his ears. Inside, the air was heavy with damp concrete and faint candle smoke. Makeshift cots lined the floor, children huddled under blankets, women spooning soup from dented pots, men coughing into their sleeves. It was a shelter, a place the city had forgotten. And at the center of it, Emily knelt, gently tying a bandage around the arm of a boy no older than 10. The boy winced, then smiled weakly at her. She whispered something that made him laugh despite the pain. Richard froze. His daughter wasn't begging for herself. She was begging for them. Emily finally turned, her hood slipping back, wet hair clinging to her face. She looked straight at him, not ashamed now, but steady.
"This is why," she said.
"This is where the money goes."
"Every dollar?"
"Every hour."
"Every part of me," Richard's breath caught.
He had spent years lecturing her about investments, about returns, about legacy. But here, this crumbling basement full of hungry souls, she had built a legacy without him, one that couldn't be measured in stocks. His instinct was to pull out his checkbook, to solve everything the way he always had. But Emily's eyes warned him.
"Don't," she whispered.
"Don't turn this into a headline or a charity dinner.
"If you want to help,
then see them, not as numbers."
"Not as leverage, as people." The room was quiet, waiting.
Richard, the man who had commanded thousands, felt the weight of dozens of tired eyes on him.
His throat tightened.
For the first time in his life, he didn't know what to say. So he did something no one expected. He took off his heavy cashmere coat, laid it over the shoulders of an old man shivering in the corner, and sat down beside him. The room exhaled. Emily's eyes softened with something like relief, maybe even forgiveness. But Richard felt something else stirring, fear. Because if the world discovered where she had been and who she had chosen to stand beside, everything he had built could come crashing down, and yet, sitting there in the dim basement with his daughter, he wondered if maybe that was exactly what needed to happen. The basement was warmer now, though the chill still clung to the walls. Richard sat shoulder to shoulder with men whose names he didn't know, men who smelled of damp wool and days without sleep. He'd eaten at tables carved from Italian marble, but the chipped bowl of thin soup pressed into his hands by a weary mother felt heavier than any crystal chalice. Emily moved among them with ease, her voice gentle, her hands steady. When she laughed, the room lifted a little. When she touched someone's shoulder, they seemed to straighten as if they mattered again. Richard watched, the ache in his chest growing sharper. Finally, when the last of the cots were filled and the soup pot scraped empty, Emily sat opposite him. For the first time that night, she looked directly into his eyes and didn't look away. "You're wondering why I left," Richard swallowed, his throat dry.
"Every day," she twisted her fingers together, knuckles pale.
"You built a world so high, Dad, no one without wings could reach you. I tried to climb it, to be what you wanted, your perfect daughter, the polished smile at the charity galas. But I couldn't breathe up there," her words struck like a hammer. Richard leaned forward, wanting to defend himself, to explain. But she raised a hand. "There's more." She drew in a deep breath. 2 years ago I met someone.
"Not from your world."
"Not with your kind of money. He showed me this shelter, this street, this need. And for the first time I felt useful. Like I wasn't just decoration on your arm." Richard's heart lurched. He searched her face, realizing the hollow look in her eyes hadn't come from hunger or shame. It came from grief. "What happened?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes shimmered. "He died, flew fast. No doctors would come here. No hospital would take him because he had no insurance.
I begged them.
But doors closed in my face."
"And I knew." If your name had been mine, if your money had been his, he'd still be alive. The words tore through the air.
Richard's breath stuttered. A silence deeper than any boardroom negotiation stretched between them. Emily's voice trembled now. So I stayed. For the others who don't get seen.
I begged on the street, not because I had nothing, but because they had nothing.
I wanted you to understand, to finally see me.
And see them. Tears burned at Richard's eyes, something he hadn't allowed since he was a boy.
He tried to speak, but the words tangled. All his power, all his fortune, all his ruthless decisions, it had built an empire of glass that shattered the moment his daughter's truth hit it. Emily reached across the table, placing her calloused hand over his. If you want me back in your life, Dad, it can't be on your terms anymore. It has to be on theirs. For the first time, Richard didn't feel like the man in control. He felt like a father stripped bare, given a choice he couldn't buy his way out of. And in that moment, for the first time in decades, he bowed his. Morning broke grey and uncertain over the city. From the Langford Tower's top floor, Richard stood at the window, watching traffic crawl below like a river of steel. His reflection stared back at him in the glass. Sharp suit, silver hair, the image of power. But for the first time in his life, he didn't recognize the man. Behind him, the boardroom murmured. His executives waited, papers spread across the long table, screens glowing with numbers. They were ready to finalize the biggest deal of his career, an acquisition that would push his empire past the 1 trillion mark. But Richard's thoughts weren't in the numbers. They were in a damp church basement, where faces hungry and forgotten had lifted toward him with silent hope, where Emily's eyes had demanded not pity, not money, but change, Mr. Langford. One of the men pressed. Shall we proceed? Richard turned slowly. The air in the room was brittle, as if one wrong word would shatter it. He looked at the contracts, waiting for his signature. Then he looked at the faces, calculating, expectant, blind to anything but profit. He slid the pen across the table, untouched.
No, he said. The room froze. No?
Echoed another. Richard, this is history.
This is legacy.
What are you— My legacy, Richard cut in, his voice steady, isn't in another tower, another zero on a balance sheet. My legacy is in what I leave for people who can't fight their way into these rooms. People like the ones we step over on the sidewalk every day. Gasps, scoffs, murmurs of disbelief. You can't be serious, but he was. For the first time in his life, Richard felt the weight lift. He gathered the papers, tore them clean in half, and let the pieces fall to the polished floor. I won't build higher walls, he said quietly. I'll build longer tables. When he left the tower, reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. Questions hurled like stones. Are you walking away from billions? Has Langford lost his mind? He didn't answer. He walked straight into the rain, where a familiar figure waited. Emily, standing by the curb, her hood down this time, her chin lifted. The crowd buzzed when he reached her, but Richard didn't care. He took her hand firmly and raised it, not as an apology, not as an announcement, but as a vow. She's with me, he said, his voice cutting through the chaos.
And from this day forward, so are the people she stands for. Emily's eyes filled, but she didn't cry.
She only nodded, her grip tight in his. For the first time in years, Richard felt like more than a billionaire. He felt like a father. And in the quiet that followed, he knew. His empire would crumble, his reputation would change, but his daughter was finally home. And that was worth more than the world.